Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news for us Michigan fans coming out of the recruiting trail as the Michigan commitment jersey comes back on. Four-star wide receiver Andrew Marsh making it official, committing to this Michigan program in the 2025 class. A guy that, we've talked extensively about over the last couple of weeks and months. In my opinion, the most talented wide receiver to commit to Michigan since Donovan Peoples-Jones. And even with DPJ was much more of a traitsy wide receiver. You look at Andrew Marsh and say, this kid is about as well-rounded as it gets. He's a polished wide receiver who's very developed going into his senior year. It's hard to see Andrew Marsh not being a significant impact maker year one as a freshman in the 2025 season. I think what I love most about Andrew Marsh is this kid is so well-rounded at the wide receiver position. You take a look at the film, which we're going to get into in just a second. One, the ability to create separation and run clean routes. That's probably the biggest differentiator from a lot of young freshmen that need a couple of years at the collegiate level to guys that can make immediate impacts. That route running aspect of the game. You see a lot of wide receivers who are just big, fast, and kind of have relied on that at the high school level. You turn on the film with Andrew Marsh and say, he might not be the biggest. He might not be the fastest, although he's pretty fast. This kid is a polished wide receiver that knows how to create separation. That is by far the most important attribute you can have as a wide receiver. You take a look at him after the catch. Extremely competitive. Yes, he does have good long speed, but the short area quickness, the contact balance, this is a guy that you can get him the football in these short intermediate route trees and kind of just let him do the rest. And I think the final thing you love about his game, that ability to go up and make plays vertically down the field. The body control, the coordination plays much bigger than that 6'1", 170-pound frame. Andrew Marsh does it all. He's been extremely productive in the state of Texas, over 140 catches for over 2,400 yards, 31 touchdowns. This kid has been doing it since his freshman year of high school. I think this is a massive commitment for Michigan. We've talked about it all the time. You want to see Michigan get more difference makers at the wide receiver position. And I think what's so important about Andrew Marsh is if he can kind of come in and be that year one difference maker that we all expect him to be. And what happens to Michigan on the recruiting trail when we're going after these wide receivers? I feel like there's this stigma around Michigan where you go to Michigan as a wide receiver, you're not going to get a ton of opportunities because of how Michigan's offense is structured. Andrew Marsh has the opportunity to kind of buck that trend for this Michigan program. Want to get into the film, talk about what Andrew Marsh brings to this Michigan program. Now, before we do, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Michigan fans talking fall camp, talking the recruiting trail. You guys continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the boys. We can't thank you all enough. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Andrew Marsh. And again, I think it starts with polished wide receiver, extremely productive at the high school ranks. And I think Andrew Marsh comes into this 2025 cycle and it kind of emerges as that true wide receiver one for Michigan, where we're going to look at the other pass catchers coming in. We have a tight end in Andrew Olish, who I think is going to be a massive contributor in that passing attack. But I think Michigan was looking for that true wide receiver one that can be the difference maker on the outside, something that, maybe Michigan has lacked over the last couple of years, although Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson have been very good players. Andrew Marsh can be that wide receiver one that Michigan has been looking for. You get into the film, it's really hard not to fall in love with the film. The first thing you're going to see is that ability to create separation. This kid running routes, it's so clean. It's so smooth. I mean, that ability to get in and out, create a ton of separation at the top of the route tree. Then when he gets the football in space, one, very physical after the catch, and he's really competitive. I mean, this is a guy that can operate with the football in his hands. He's got that long speed, but he also has that ability to stay on his feet, be very tough for defensive backs to bring down. There's so many different ways that Andrew Marsh can get involved in this Michigan offense. Right here, you're going to see him work kind of a post in the middle of the field, and hey, let's just go up and make a play. I mean, you talk about high pointing the football, playing bigger than you are at 6'1", 175. I mean, Andrew Marsh is not the biggest wide receiver, but he plays big, and that's what's most important, coming down, making a play. Andrew Marsh has that capability to not only win with separation, but just go win over top. Really good release right here. And I think this is, you talk about polish, you talk about being a crafty wide receiver, why we think Andrew Marsh can be a year one guy for Michigan. Take a look at the top of this route and using that arm to create a little crafty separation late. This is what the veteran wide receivers do. They get away with it all the time. A little push off at the top, body control, coordination, coming down with the catch. Those are all the things that Andrew Marsh brings to the table. I think lastly, this kid is elite with the football in his hands. I mean, the short area quicks, the ability to make pretty much half that football team miss, and then the long speed. When he gets into the open field, he's got really long strides. He has that home run playability. When he does get to the open field, he can cook in a straight line. Runs a 50-second 400-meter dash. I mean, he can cook, again, creating separation. That it's so easy for him. He's such a smooth operator. You talk about all the wide receivers that you see excel not only at the college game, but at the NFL game, the guys like Stephon Diggs and Justin Jefferson. What do they all do at a high level? It's not because they're the biggest or fastest. It's because they know how to separate. And Andrew Marsh can do that at such a high level. And again, you see what he can do after the catch, being he's got a little bit of dog in him. He's got a little bit of attitude. And I think that's exactly what Michigan needs in this wide receiver room. Taking a look at what he can do in special teams too. Again, what he can do with the football in his hands. If you take a bad angle, he's going to make you pay. He's going to make you miss in space. Obviously, I mean, talk about change of direction. We see this in the route run, but also with the football in his hand and just making this kicker look silly. I think Andrew Marsh is a true difference maker for the next 3 years for this Michigan program. You take a look at the 2025 cycle and say, we're feeling pretty good about what Michigan has in the pass catcher room, right? You start scrolling down and say, one, Andrew Olish, I think, highlights it. Andrew Olish is going to be a difference maker, catching the football at tight end. But you start scrolling down and say, all right, Jacob Washington, 6'3", 180 from Louisiana, more of that vertical threat. A guy I kind of compared to Amarian Walker in terms of really long, really big, really fast, not the polished wide receiver that Andrew Marsh is, but Jacob Washington serves a role in this Michigan offense. You continue to scroll down and say, hey, Eli Owens, think he might be kind of that Max Bredesen role, going to be a dog in the run blocking department, can operate probably a little bit more juice than what Max Bredesen brings. But Eli Owens, it was certainly going to play a role within this Michigan offense. And now you have Andrew Marsh enter into the fold and say, that was kind of the missing piece in this 2025 class with the pass catchers. We got 2 tight ends that we think are going to provide a lot of value. We have Jacob Washington, who's this long, fast wide receiver who can attack that deeper third. And now you talk about Andrew Marsh and say he's that true, well-rounded wide receiver one that you can get involved all over the football field. You know, kind of how they used a guy like Roman Wilson or a guy like Cornelius Johnson, all sorts of different ways. Andrew Marsh can get involved. I think that's the biggest thing about Andrew Marsh is he's not going to be that one-trick pony wide receiver that can only work vertically down the field. A lot of different things you can use to get him involved in this offense. We'll cut it down there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.